Grandpa Ned had seen it all in his 83 years: wars, recessions, the birth of the internet, the death of common courtesy. But he'd never seen someone's jaw literally drop until that Christmas party at Henderson Tech, when his granddaughter Maya stood up, champagne flute trembling in her hand, and announced to her boss that she'd just sold an app for $130 million. The old man had been sitting in the corner of the corporate ballroom, nursing a ginger ale and watching the festivities with the detached amusement of someone who'd long ago stopped caring about office politics. Maya had invited him to the party. "Please, Grandpa, I need at least one friendly face there." And he'd agreed, partly because he loved his granddaughter fiercely, and partly because he was curious to see the place that had been slowly crushing her spirit for the past 4 years. The silence that followed Maya's announcement was exquisite. Ned could hear the distant hum of the heating system, the clink of ice in someone's drink 3 tables over, the rapid, shallow breathing of Charles Whitmore, Maya's boss, the man who'd spent 4 years treating her like furniture. Ned leaned back in his chair, a smile playing at the corners of his weathered face. Now this, he thought, is going to be good. The story had actually started 6 months earlier, on a Sunday afternoon in Ned's cluttered garage. Maya had shown up unannounced, which she did when things were bad. She didn't cry anymore. Ned had noticed that change about 2 years into her job at Henderson Tech. She'd learned to compress her frustration into something harder, denser, like coal becoming diamond under pressure. "He walked right past my desk today," she'd said, helping Ned organize his collection of vintage radio parts. "I said good morning. I was the only person in that section. He looked directly at me and kept walking." "How long's this been going on?" Ned had asked, though he knew the answer. She'd been telling him these stories for years. "Since I started." Maya held up a vacuum tube to the light, examining it. "You know what's funny? I'm the one who designed the core algorithm for their flagship product. My code processes 60% of the company's transactions, but in meetings, Charles directs questions about my own work to Derek, who sits next to me. Derek, who joined 8 months after I did." Ned had heard this particular grievance before, in various forms. Derek was CC'd on emails about Maya's projects. Derek was invited to client dinners. Derek got the promotion to senior developer that should have been Maya's. Derek, a perfectly mediocre programmer who happened to play golf with Charles on Sundays. "You know what I used to do," Ned had said, settling into his workshop stool, "back when I was in aerospace engineering." Maya had smiled despite herself. "Tell me, Grandpa." "I kept a notebook. Every slight, every stolen idea, every time some jackass took credit for my calculations. And you know what I did with that notebook? Set it on fire in a symbolic gesture of letting go." "Hell no, I used it to build my own company." Ned had fixed her with those sharp blue eyes that age hadn't dimmed one bit. "Started in my garage just like this one. Took 6 years, but I built something they couldn't ignore, something they couldn't take from me." That conversation had planted a seed. Maya had been coding since she was 12, when Ned had given her his old laptop and a book on Python programming. By 16, she was building apps for local businesses. By 20, she'd graduated top of her class from MIT. Henderson Tech had recruited her aggressively, promising innovation, creativity, a chance to work on cutting-edge projects. What they'd delivered was Charles Whitmore. Charles was a particular species of middle manager, the kind who'd failed upward through a combination of confidence and connections. He was 43, dressed like he thought he was 30, and managed through a strategy of calculated neglect. He praised loudly and publicly when things went well, taking subtle credit, and blamed quietly and specifically when they didn't, usually Maya. He'd perfected the art of looking through people he considered beneath his notice. And Maya, for reasons she'd never fully understood, had been beneath his notice from day one. At first she'd thought it was accidental, then she'd thought she'd done something to offend him, then she'd realized it was deliberate, a power play, a way of establishing hierarchy. The realization had been crushing. She was being erased, professionally disappeared, by a man who'd probably forgotten he was even doing it. But that Sunday in Ned's garage, something had shifted. She'd gone home and opened her laptop. Not the Henderson Tech laptop, her personal one, and she'd started coding. The app was called Phantom. The name was deliberate, a private joke about invisibility. The concept was deceptively simple, a project management tool that used AI to predict project bottlenecks before they happened, but the execution was anything but simple. Maya had poured 4 years of frustration into 6 months of furious, brilliant coding. She worked every evening after leaving Henderson Tech, every weekend, every vacation day. She coded in coffee shops and libraries, on trains and planes, during her lunch breaks in her car. Ned had been her only confidant. He'd stop by her apartment some evenings, bringing dinner from the Greek place she liked, and sit quietly while she worked. Sometimes he'd offer suggestions. His engineering mind was still sharp, but mostly he just provided presence, solidarity, a reminder that she existed, that she mattered, even when her daily reality suggested otherwise. "You're building something real," he'd told her one night when she was ready to give up, when the code wouldn't compile and the feature set seemed impossible. "Charles can't ignore what he doesn't know exists. You're creating leverage, kiddo, the best kind, the kind they can't take away." 3 months in, she'd launched a beta version. Within 2 weeks, she had 5,000 users. Within a month, 20,000. The growth was exponential, organic, driven entirely by word of mouth. Phantom was solving a real problem and solving it better than anything else on the market. The acquisition offers had started at month 4. Maya had turned down the first 3 offers. They were respectable 7 figures, enough to quit Henderson Tech and never look back. But Ned had given her advice that proved crucial. Don't sell to the first bidder, and don't sell until you've decided why you're selling. Money, freedom, revenge, know your why. Maya had thought about that. What did she want? She wanted Charles Whitmore to see her, really see her. She wanted him to understand, in the most visceral way possible, what he'd dismissed. She wanted the moment of recognition. The flicker of understanding that he'd had a generational talent sitting 15 feet from his office, and he'd been too blind, too arrogant, too wrapped up in his own mediocrity to notice. She didn't just want to quit, she wanted to haunt him. So she'd waited. She'd kept working at Henderson Tech, showing up every day to be ignored, to be talked over, to watch Derek get credit for her ideas. And she'd kept building Phantom, kept growing it, kept turning down offers. Until Technova came calling. Technova was a titan, a company that made Henderson Tech look like a lemonade stand. Their offer was staggering, $130 million, plus stock options, plus a position as Director of Innovation in their San Francisco office. Maya had said yes. The deal had closed 2 days before Henderson Tech's annual holiday party. Now standing in the ballroom of the Riverside Plaza Hotel, watching Charles Whitmore's face cycle through confusion, disbelief, and something approaching horror, Maya felt a calm she hadn't experienced in 4 years. "I'm sorry," Charles finally managed. "You sold what?" "An app." Maya's voice was steady. She'd practiced this in the mirror, with Grandpa Ned coaching her on delivery. Not gloating, that would be petty, just factual, clear, unavoidable. "I built it over the past 6 months. It's a project management platform with predictive AI. Technova acquired it on Tuesday." The party had gone completely silent. Everyone was watching now, the developers Maya had mentored, the managers who'd talked over her in meetings, the executives who'd never learned her name. Even the catering staff had paused mid-serve. $130 million, someone whispered. Charles's face had gone an interesting shade of red. We didn't know you were working on outside projects." "You never asked." Maya took a sip of her champagne. "To be fair, Charles, you never asked me much of anything. I don't think you've spoken directly to me in about 18 months. From his corner, Ned watched his granddaughter with fierce pride. This was the moment she'd earned. 4 years of being invisible, and now she was the only person in the room anyone could see. "I don't understand," Charles said, and for the first time Maya heard something real in his voice. Confusion, yes, but also hurt, as if he were the wronged party. "Why didn't you come to me? We could have. Henderson Tech could have." "Could have what?" Maya's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. Ignored it like you ignored me, had Derek present it in meetings, offered me a 5% raise while promoting someone else to lead the project I created. Charles opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. He looked like a fish, Ned thought. A fish, suddenly realizing the water had disappeared. I'm putting in my notice, Maya continued. Effective immediately. I start at Technova next month. I wanted to tell you in person at the party because, she paused, and for the first time emotion crept into her voice. Because for 4 years I showed up every single day and you looked right through me. I wanted to make sure that this time you actually saw me, that you understood what you missed. She set down her champagne glass and walked toward the exit. The crowd parted for her automatically, people she'd worked with for years suddenly desperate to make eye contact, to offer congratulations, to pretend they'd always seen her value. Grandpa Ned stood up, his joints protesting but his spirit soaring. He caught up with Maya at the coat check. How do you feel? He asked. Maya considered the question. Lighter, she finally said, like I've been carrying something heavy and I finally put it down. Good, Ned helped her into her coat. Because that's what this was really about, not him seeing you, you seeing yourself, understanding your worth, even when nobody else did. They walked out into the December night, leaving the party and Charles Whitmore and Henderson Tech behind. Somewhere inside, Ned knew Charles was probably beginning to understand what had happened. Maybe he'd even feel remorse, though Ned doubted it. People like Charles rarely learned. But that didn't matter anymore. So, Ned said as they reached Maya's car. San Francisco, huh? That's pretty far from the old garage. Maya smiled, and it was genuine, the first real smile Ned had seen from her in months. I'll visit every Sunday, promise. Someone has to help you organize those radio parts. Damn right, Ned hugged his granddaughter tight. I'm proud of you, kiddo, not for the money, though that's nice, for building something real, for not letting them make you invisible. As Maya drove away, Ned stood in the parking lot for a moment, looking up at the stars barely visible through the city's light pollution. He thought about his own career, his own struggles, the notebook full of slights he'd transformed into motivation. The best revenge, he'd learned long ago, wasn't destruction. It was creation, building something so undeniable that even blind men had to see it. Maya had learned that lesson, and Charles Whitmore, standing in that ballroom right now, was learning it too, probably for the first time in his comfortable, mediocre life. Ned smiled and headed for his car. Tomorrow he'd start clearing space in the garage. Maya would need somewhere to work on her next project when she visited. After all, $130 million was just the beginning.